So, a very, very warm welcome to everybody here, and thank you so much for inviting me. As soon as I arrived here, I felt as though I was being received by long-term Dhamma family, I would say. Even though actually I don't know that I've met any of the organisers here before, except for a short email or two back and forwards, and it just brought to my mind how important it is and how beneficial to the practice it is to feel welcome. So I want to extend a really warm welcome to everybody here and say that no matter who you are, where you come from, what you think about yourself, what social status, gender, race you are, however you identify, you are absolutely warmly welcome and celebrated. And it was quite moving to reflect actually on Nina's words earlier today, because I remembered you said to me yesterday, you're the most wanted person here.
Yes, you are.
And then I was thinking, gosh, this is so different from a little cartoon that I created in my head a few years ago when I was struggling in England without any other monastics supporting me, feeling not included by the lay community, not included by the Sangha, the only bhikkhuni in the country. And I actually had this little image of a cartoon, and it said most unwanted. Like the prisoners in prison, and they have wanted. It said most unwanted, and it was this sad nun, with this thing around her neck. And the difference is enormous. I mean, now it seems quite sad to think that that's how it was. And of course, the practice falters in these conditions. So one of the purposes of coming together is to be with spiritual friends and to feel welcome, to feel included, to feel that you matter and that you're valued, and actually celebrated for who you are. So I want to celebrate you and celebrate the fact that we're together, because it's a really special opportunity. Even though it's just for 2.5 days or even 1.5 or whatever, time doesn't really matter. It's the fact that we're here for the same purpose, and the purpose is a very beautiful one, to cultivate loving kindness. So loving kindness is an incredibly powerful, beautiful practice that gives rise to a lot of wholesome states. It applies to our everyday life and can help us greatly in the happiness of our day-to-day life. But also it provides a great foundation, not only for virtue, but for the practice of samadhi. And the Buddha actually said the samadhi that is founded on sila, on virtue, which includes loving kindness, is of great fruit and great benefit. It's not the kind of peaceful state you have once in a while and then it collapses again, or that you get to just by striving and sheer force of will. It's the kind of stillness and serenity and settledness of the heart and the mind that comes through cultivating loving kindness. And loving kindness, as I say, is a foundation for virtue, which I'll talk about a bit more this evening. So I'm not going to go too far into loving kindness, other than to give you a little bit of practice today. But I wanted to give you some general guidelines for the retreat and how to approach the retreat, and also what the practice of virtue really means, because we're going to be taking the precepts together. And it's up to you. You can maybe think about this while you listen to my words, as to whether you wish to take the 5 or the 8. Right? They're not just numbers, and I'll explain why that is. But the 5 precepts are the basic ethical guidelines on not doing harm with body or speech. And the 8 precepts go a little bit further and refine our conduct in terms of simplifying our life. So not having food after 12, and actually solar noon, so don't worry if it's 12, but that's your last meal of the day, it's okay. And not using physical bodily decorations, so you're not trying to kind of impress anybody through how you appear, how you look, how you present, how you smell, right? So you can really simplify and just be yourself. And then the last one is not sleeping on high and luxurious beds, which automatically you're already doing. So all of you are going to be observing 6 precepts. Ordinary beds are fine. You don't have to sleep on the floor. You don't have to go and float on the lake or anything. So just relax and be comfortable in an everyday kind of way. Yeah. So it's just not indulging our senses. So retreats. What are retreats? And one of the first things I want to say is that you're already practicing loving kindness by giving yourself the gift of a retreat. It is a gift to yourself. And it's one of the most beautiful gifts you can offer. It's not just time and space. It's also the opportunity to cultivate the qualities of the heart that are going to lead towards awakening. That means coming out of delusion, coming out of confusion, and starting to increase a really kind of pure and lasting happiness inside yourselves that comes from within. And we're doing this together, which is really beautiful, because we all can kind of, in a way, enhance one another's qualities, but each person's practice strengthens our own. So it's always stronger somehow to practice in community, because it also gives that aspect of being able to contribute to another person's path. Some of us are so well practiced, we're quite happy to practice on our own, but here you're practicing loving kindness, so you can actually directly benefit other people by holding them in your heart and sharing your practice and your good thoughts and good wishes for them with them while you're here together. So I find it a really beautiful thing to do as a community, because loving kindness has this natural kind of, it brings people together, and it creates a lot of harmony, a lot of goodwill, patience, forgiveness, acceptance, inclusivity. You know, one of the words that I've been playing around a lot with related to loving kindness is inclusivity. Because love includes it all, it includes everybody. It even includes all our mental states. And I'll be going into that in more detail tomorrow. But the retreat mode is a different mode from our everyday life. It is not the kind of results-orientated, kind of input-output, how much am I getting for what I'm contributing? You know, you might have paid something to be here, I don't know. It's not about that. It's actually about process. So it's not where you get to as much as how you're practicing, how you're relating to the practice in each and every moment. So don't worry if, you don't think you're making progress. You actually aren't the best judge. In fact, no one can really judge that. That's something that shows itself over time. But what the Buddha says is that every drop you put in that jar, every time you have even a thought of loving kindness, like for a finger snap of time, that is progress, big progress on the path, even more than giving food to the hungry, because you're actually addressing the root of where generosity and all other beautiful virtues come from. So loving kindness is actually working with the depth of the mind, the motivation of the mind, and it gives long-term benefits. So see if you can just start to enjoy the practice, because loving kindness practice is naturally happy. It leads to ease, it leads to well-being, and it's a beautiful thing to do. To have good thoughts and intentions towards oneself and towards others is already the benefit and the goal, in a sense. Every time we can turn our thoughts around to thoughts that, lift the heart, and thoughts that bring that bit more happiness and goodwill into the world, is a moment of loving kindness. So please try to relax as much as you possibly can. I know many of you are sitting on the floor, which is absolutely fine, and you might be used to that, but if you ever need to use a chair, there's loads of space in this room. You can have some chairs at the side or at the back. You might not think you need it. You might think, I can deal with the pain, but it's not about dealing with anything or facing it or fighting it. It's about offering yourself the greatest sense of ease that you possibly can, so that you can really relax and let go of some of the tensions that we carry with us from the struggles of life, right? Tensions that build up automatically and subconsciously in our bodies. We don't even know. We're holding our shoulders up here, by our ears because we've been on the computer, or I don't know what other kind of little tensions might be lodged into your body. Maybe the results of injuries, the muscles are overcompensating and they don't actually need to right now. So see if you can really find a very relaxed position for your body, even if that means taking an extra cushion and finding a space to lie down. What do you reckon? Anyone tired in here? Anyone tired from the week? No one tired? Yeah, those that have been serving for our benefit have sacrificed their rest and are feeling tired. So please, that applies to you as well. You can lie down. I don't mind if you point your feet at me. There are all these Buddhist customs in Buddhist countries not to point your feet because it's disrespect. I mean, if you know it's disrespect and you're doing it thinking, well, I don't care because I don't respect this person, then yes, it's disrespect. But if that's not what it means to you, then that's not where you're coming from, and I will not take it as disrespect. So please do what you need to do for your body, respect your body, because it's different from everyone else's. So please find the most comfortable position you can. Was it you that earlier today we were having a cup of tea and you sat on a sofa and you were like, whoa, he really sunk back into the sofa. And I thought that is a good meditation place for someone who needs a sofa.
Santo did it afterwards.
Afterwards, so it's contagious.
I'm learning from him.
So if I come to the lounge and see you all kind of, I will presume you're enjoying your retreat or that you need a rest. So if you go to sleep, it's okay. And you don't have to follow the schedule, it's just a guideline, it's an invitation. If it sounds appealing, wonderful. If it sounds like this is just not what I feel my mind wants to do, leave it aside. Again, I'm not counting you. I've counted you already. There's 27 of you. I like that number. It's my favourite number, actually. It's the date of my ordination and of my birthday. That sounds a bit narcissistic. I'm not narcissistic. But I know how many of you there are, so I'm not counting it again. So if a few of you aren't here, I won't even bat an eyelid, okay? So the whole retreat is about giving. Giving is also a word that's very close to loving kindness. We practice love to give of ourselves, to share something of our life's energies, to give without expecting anything in return. This is one of the meanings of loving kindness. And this is also, again, aligned with right intention. We're not practicing to spiritualize ourselves, create a better sense of self, or, a personality that we're more agreeable to. This isn't the point. We're meditating to accept that this process of body and mind is the way it is due to conditions, and it's perfectly fine the way it is. But we can also develop this purity inside ourselves that brings happiness. So the Buddha never said, do this because, you should, because you're a bad person if you don't. He always said, do what brings you out of suffering and leads towards Nibbana. How do you know it's leading towards Nibbana? Because it's bringing you out of suffering. It's that simple. Okay, so anything that's bringing you more peace, more ease is a good thing to do. You will have the container of virtue, so you don't need to worry too much more about that. Your body and speech are going to be pretty much pure. What you're doing with your mind is something else, but we can learn that as we practice, because metta is actually conditioning our mind to also have beautiful thoughts. So please enjoy the practice. This is my biggest wish for everyone here. Metta is naturally happy, and it's going to make you lots of friends. You might find little birds coming and sitting by your room, or cats. Yeah, if the cats come, they just want to look cute. They don't need anything. So try not to stroke them, because if the hairs go everywhere, some of us might get sick, including myself. So, but the cats are really sweet, and they'll also feel quite chilled out, I think, once we all enter silence, and they'll enjoy the retreat. So, again, a very warm welcome. And I think that's enough on loving kindness for now, because I want to do some practice. But I wanted to talk a bit more about virtue and why we take the precepts in the beginning of a retreat. Does everyone here know what the precepts are? Does anybody not know what the precepts are? That's amazing. Wow. Also, I want to ask you, how many people here have never meditated before? Anyone? Shall I go home? You're all in? That's amazing. So I have a group of experienced practitioners here. Wow. I think there's something about, it's not Scandinavia, Nordic countries that really conduce to people's minds being clear and quite tranquil, actually. I know that won't always be the case for any single person in this room, but I do find that in Norway anyway, where I've taught a few times, people's minds seem to naturally calm down, much more than people where I'm from. So it's inspiring for me as well. So yeah, wonderful. Good. So, virtue. It's not just rules. It's not a list of do's and don'ts. It actually permeates our whole life. it brings a sense of beauty about a person. I don't know if you've ever met a person who you feel is really loving or really beautiful and asked yourself why. It's usually because they have a lot of virtue. They speak beautifully, they give, they're generous, they protect beings. They don't just not kill, they protect life. They try to support charities, or they care about people who are less privileged than themselves. And they have this aura about them that sort of bestows a sense of trust. Even to animals, animals can feel that. I remember when I'm not saying this is me, okay, but I have to tell stories and they're from my life. But at this time I was on retreat for like a long time in Perth, and I had this beautiful kuti in the middle of the in the valley, in its own valley, surrounded by ridges, forested ridges. And in the creek there were like a little river, and then on the other ridge of the hill you could see the Indian Ocean, and beyond there was nothing as far as Madagascar, just ocean. And the only companions I had at that time were the kangaroos. I also had Ajahn Brahm, who would come down in a car, because it was quite away from the main monastery, once a week to talk to me about my meditation, which was like the highlight of the week. Especially because he used to actually spend 5 minutes while I was not in my kuti, meditating, just to kind of get the energy really strong. And it was just so powerful. He'd go and sit in there and I'd still be on the walking path outside just sitting, and it was like these blasts of metta were coming out of the kuti. It was just the most incredible thing. I mean, even more than the whole hour-long interview. That was the biggest teaching for me. It was just extraordinary. And sometimes I'd even say to him, like, oh, I'm feeling peaceful, but there's not a lot of joy today. He'd say, okay, let me go in and sort of see. And then he'd do something, and I'd go in afterwards and just start feeling like bubbling up with joy, like so tangibly. It was almost like supercharging me. It was like all this piti coming through the body and mind. It was really extraordinary. So anyway, that's a bit of a detour, but on the story. But apart from Ajahn Brahm, my only companions were these kangaroo families, and most of them were quite shy. So of course, when I was walking towards my cottage, they'd go in the opposite direction, right? I mean, they wouldn't kind of run because they got used to me, but they'd hop away. But one day I was coming back, and they were really close to my cottage, and I thought they're definitely going to go. But the family that I knew the best and that I'd given names to my amazement, started moving in towards the cottage and closer to me as I was coming into my cottage. And then I realised there was a male kangaroo. Sorry, any guys here? This is kangaroos, okay, not Finnish men. But there were these big kangaroos, male, and they have usually about 20 women that they're chasing at once, and they were kind of trying to approach, and have their way with these female kangaroos who wanted nothing to do with it because they already had their like joeys for the year. And that's why they were coming closer to the kuti, because they felt safe. And it was so beautiful to see that. And that's because, they knew no harm could come. They knew they'd be protected. Really lovely. And I'm sure you all have similar experiences, but there's something about practicing virtue that brings that sense of trust. There's a sense of harmlessness that you're offering to the world. So you're committed to non-harm. And the Buddha actually went as far as to say that, having virtue is like having a casket of jewels that you hold on your head. You hold them so carefully there, you wouldn't let them fall away. And you protect your virtue in the way that you'd protect life, sometimes even at the risk of your life. This doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be wise with how we use our speech and, how we apply virtue, because there are some very extreme situations when you can say, is it okay to tell a little lie? Okay, I'm talking extreme. So one of the stories that comes up sometimes is, well, what do you do if, you're in Nazi Germany and, the Nazis come to your house and you happen to have some Jews there that you're hiding, Jewish people. And they say, have you got any Jewish people here? What do you do if you're a virtuous person, Do you say, yes, come in, knowing that their lives are at risk? Or do you have to say a lie? So, there's very, very few occasions that we have to really kind of balance whether we hold the virtue to the letter or whether there's something greater at stake. But generally speaking, once we start to feel the benefits of virtue and we start to realize the importance of that for our communities, for our societies, and for our meditation practice, there comes a time when you will not be willing to compromise your virtue. Even if you have to sacrifice some material comfort or even sometimes a friend. It can happen. But for now, we can enjoy the beauty of virtue. And again, as I was saying, it also extends into the way we use our mind. And you'll be happy to know that if your body and speech is virtuous in this retreat, we'll be using our mind also to cultivate thoughts of loving kindness. And that is a kind of sense restraint because it keeps at bay any unwholesome states. To the extent that you have thoughts and intentions of loving kindness, afflictive states, afflictive thoughts like thoughts of ill will are absent at that time. Yeah? So you can be so happy just to think a single thought of loving kindness. It's impossible, the Buddha said, at the same time that you can harbour a thought of ill will. Just let that sink in. It's kind of big. Right? Even one thought of loving kindness at that time, there's no cruelty, there's no harm, there's no trace of ill will in your mind. For that moment. And we can repeat this again and again and again. And it also takes a lot of wisdom to practice virtue at a deep level. We have to start getting wise about what is an unwholesome or a wholesome state of mind. We have to know what is really for our benefit and what's for our harm. And we also have to start understanding more about happiness, because the Buddha said that there are certain types of happiness that come from the senses. If there weren't, then we wouldn't indulge in any sensuality at all. There is a gratification in sensual pleasure, but there's also a danger. And one of the main dangers is not to be kind of, moralistic and kind of, like a sort of, what do you call it, a killjoy or something. But one of the dangers is that you're missing a greater kind of happiness, a purer kind of happiness, and you're keeping your senses overstimulated. So you don't really have the chance to go inside and touch that peace of mind. So this is one of the dangers in sensual happiness. And the Buddha said that by contrast, the happiness of virtue, of living a blameless life, is the blameless bliss. And there's a beautiful sutta in the Anguttara Nikayas. It might be the Avijja Sutta. It's kind of a similar sequence in the Avijja Sutta and also the Upanisa Sutta, both in the Anguttara Nikayas. You can look it up afterwards or ask me for the reference if you're interested in that. And the Buddha says that from living a blameless life, from basically having virtue, the benefit is non-remorse. Sometimes benefit isn't necessarily obvious straight away, but you can go to bed with a happy conscience. Imagine someone like some of these political leaders that we see in the world that are really espousing hate. Do you think they can go to bed with a happy heart? Really? If they can, then they're numb, right? If they can, then they've cut off from their feelings completely. But I really don't think that's possible. I don't think they can live with a clear conscience, and there's a joy to being able to do that. There's a happiness there. So a life of non-remorse leads to joy. And that joy is something you can experience in your day-to-day life, in your material life. But it also deepens when you practice, and it deepens into something called piti, which is sometimes translated as rapture, which is the happiness that starts to come up from inside. When the mind starts to settle and focus on an object, we start to feel a sense of relief, in a sense. It's relief that the coarser kinds of stimulation are dropping away and the happiness is starting to well up from inside. It's a bit like in the pool outside, to keep that piece of water from like icing over, there has to be a kind of spring in there that bubbles up and it keeps the water slightly warmer. It's the same sort of thing. There's like something bubbling up from inside, like a spring, a wellspring of happiness. And it keeps the heart soft, it keeps it flowing, it keeps it fluid. And you start to allow that piti to permeate the body. And over time, when we have our fill, when we feel satiated with that, then it turns into tranquility, which is a deepening of the joy. It's the happiness of peace. Sometimes people think peace is boring or dull or flat. But this kind of peace is a deepening of joy. And it leads to sukha, which I like to translate as a kind of contented happiness. You can translate it as pleasure too, but it's a pleasure again of the mind. And that's the proximate cause for samadhi. So virtue again is the foundation for the samadhi that brings great fruit and great benefit. Sila paribhavito samadhi mahapala hoti mahanisamso. This is straight from the Buddha's teachings in Pali. So the samadhi, the stillness of mind that's empowered by virtue, that's founded on virtue, gives great fruit and benefit. That means it leads all the way to nibbana, and this is how this happens. From samadhi we start to see things as they really are. We have an opportunity because the hindrances have been overcome for usually quite a prolonged time. And the other reason that samadhi is so important to seeing things as they are is because it softens the mind. The mind becomes malleable, so we can use the mind in different ways. We get out of our conditioned ways of looking and regarding the world. We come out of delusion, at least to some extent at that time, and we have a kind of opening of the mind that enables us to see things from a different angle. So we have a chance to see truths like impermanence, the truth of non-self, the truth of suffering, which can sound a little bit scary without the resource of loving kindness. But loving kindness, again, it has that beautiful benefit that it cushions the mind. It gives you so much wellness, gladness, happiness, resilience, emotional stability, that when we do start to see these truths of impermanence and non-self, it doesn't shake us too much. It doesn't break us. It shakes delusion, but it doesn't break us. We've got a very healthy sense of self as a vehicle to get beyond the self. So these are some of the beautiful qualities of virtue. And as I say, it's a causal process. The other thing that's important to mention is that when we take the precepts, we're actually not saying, I will abstain from sexual misconduct or lying or whatever. We're actually saying, I undertake the training to abstain from. So it's a training, it's a process. Yeah. If you make a mistake, that's part of virtue. That's part of simply noticing, okay, I've made a mistake, and then having a chance to pick it up. Having a chance to recognize that, okay, this was actually not in line with the training that I undertook, and now I'm going to start training again. So it's all inclusive. You can't really go wrong because, look, none of us are perfect. Not even monastics, okay, are perfect. So we have a training. I have 311 restraining trainings, or trainings in restraint, I like to call it, because some of them are not virtue per se, but they're just refinements of conduct that help me become more aware, more mindful of what I'm doing and why. So let's go to the precepts. I'll talk through them a little bit and then we'll recite them together. But one of the other things that's really important, and it's on the third page, I think, the third page, is to understand these not only as don'ts. So here it's phrased a little bit differently from how I would probably. Yeah, I would probably say I undertake the training to refrain or restrain from. I like restrain from. But it's put in the negative sense. Okay, so you've got these, right? So the first one is to undertake the training to abstain from destroying living creatures. Now, the positive aspect of that is to actually start protecting life. So we don't only not kill and think, I've done that one, I'm fine, I don't kill. I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan. I've got that one packed. You actually protect life wherever you can, no matter how small. And there was a lovely little story that one of my Indian supporters told me. He said that his son, he's been listening to Ajahn Brahm's talks since he was about 5 or 6, and actually reading his books since that age as well, all the story books and, the things that are very accessible to kids. And now he's about 11, I think, and whenever he rides his bicycle to school, if he sees a snail or a slug on the ground, he actually gets off his bicycle and moves it aside. And this is just the sweetest thing, an 11-year-old boy is not usually known for being particularly patient. He might want to ride a bike fast, he might want to get to school to meet his friends, but no, because of the conditioning he's received, he recognises, okay, it's not just not intentionally killing, it's protecting life. And I found that really beautiful, a really lovely example of that. So the first one could be also taken as compassion, right? Restrain from destroying living creatures, restrain from killing, but also proactively develop compassion. Similarly, the second one is to abstain from taking that which is not given. That's a great translation, because it's not just stealing, but it's anything that's not been given. So if you're not sure it's for you, don't take it. Shall I tell you a funny story? I have to tell you this story because it made me laugh. It might not make you laugh at all because you're not monastic. But what happened today, at the end of the sauna, we came out. Actually, someone came into the sauna to tell us there were 15 minutes left. And we just presumed it must be Santu. And now I don't think it was. But this is how perception works. So we thought it was Santu. So then we went out of our sauna thinking, right, we better be quick. We've got 15 minutes, we better have a shower, get ready to, leave the place. And then we saw this plate of oats with yogurt and blueberries. And I have to have oats in the evening, right? Yeah, you get what's going to happen. I have oats in the evening because I have a gastric condition. And I also have blueberries sometimes. And this plate of oats and yogurt and blueberries was on the table, and we thought Santu must have left it there. Oh, it's so sweet. Oh my goodness, they take care of us so much. I can't believe it. They've left this beautiful food for me. I don't take blueberries in the evening, but never mind, I'm going to have it because they put me to so much trouble. And so Chi said, okay, I'll offer it to you. And then some of the group started coming in for their meeting, and we said to them, are these yours? We wanted to be really sure, So we said, are these yours? Do you know what they are? No, we don't know what that is. Oh, it must be for us, isn't it? So kind, it's so sweet. So we went outside and sat by the lake, and we felt really great after this sauna and jumping in the cold water. I definitely recommend it to all you Finnish people. Sorry, that's from a bit. And Swedish people. Anyway, so we were sitting there looking at the lake, and I'm eating this lovely food. Oh, so much loving kindness towards me. And I asked Chi to take photos of the occasion, And then this woman came out and she said, have you seen a plate? And I just thought, a plate? But you got it straight away. And she's like, because it was so nice, right, to say a plate, not have you taken my food. She just said, have you seen a plate? I haven't seen any plate, no, it's in my hand. And she said, oh. And I was, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I was quite mortified, actually, but also it was hilarious, because I just couldn't believe the irony of it, sitting there thinking one thing and it was a totally different thing, because actually I'd taken something that wasn't given and it wasn't even mine. I'm eating this woman's food. But people are so kind, and she's just like, no problem. I said, well, I've not had much of it, would you like it anyway? Yeah, sure. She took it back.
It was blessed food.
So that was really funny, but this is one of the reasons for the rule, taking that which is not given. So if it hasn't been given and you're not sure it's for you, please, unlike your teacher, don't take it, okay? So that was really quite funny anyway. It was very sweet. And you are that kind that you would have done it, I'm sure. So the next one is for the 5 precept people. So if you're taking 5 precepts, because generally it's because you want to have dinner that you take 5 and not 8, isn't it? Right. So the next one is to abstain from sexual misconduct. So obviously you're not going to go and kind of do sexual misconduct with anyone on this retreat, and most probably you're not going to have any sexual conduct anyway on this retreat. So, you might want to take the 8 precepts and abstain from dinner. But on the other side of this really means being a very trustworthy person, having honesty, having integrity in relationships, making commitments, finding compromises. Being committed means sometimes sacrificing what you want for the sake of the partner, Maybe they'll do the same for you, but you do it because it's the right thing to do. You forgive each other, you have this beautiful trust between each other. And of course, this is what all society, functioning society and beautiful community is founded on. It's founded on mutual respect and trust. And for those on 8 precepts, we abstain from all sexual conduct. Sometimes it says sexual activity as well, because it might not include another person, right? But it just means any sexuality at all. So you're actually moving inside and again finding the happiness within. And then again back to the 5 precepts. I undertake the training to restrain from, here it says incorrect speech, musavada. So normally that means lying in the 5 precepts, but it can also mean harsh speech, false speech is the lying, gossip, and for my malicious speech as well. Yeah, I've got this little acronym that helps me remember that. So on the contrary, it means using speech in a skillful way that promotes harmony and heals division, brings people together. Even people who are divided, we can bring them together by listening, by trying to understand where they're coming from, and by using speech to inspire, to gladden, even to instruct, and to encourage people in the Dhamma. So that's what we'll be trying to use our speech for. And then the last one, undertaking the training to abstain from intoxicating drinks and drugs that lead to carelessness. I think heedlessness is actually the Pali normally used, carelessness, heedlessness. So the opposite of that is developing clarity of mind, cultivating sobriety, clarity, a sense of proportion, dignity, right? Not losing your deportment, going about and conducting yourself in a respectable way. And then the last 3 are further trainings. So in addition to not having any sexual activity at all, we have the precept to refrain from eating after noon, from dancing, singing, music, going to see entertainments, wearing jewellery, using perfumes and beautifying the body with cosmetics. So this is we had our sex, now this is your rock and roll. You can't have sex, you can't have rock and roll either. Drugs is obviously out of the question. And then the last one is not sleeping on high and luxurious beds or seats. And this is really the 3 of them really are to develop a sense of contentment and wakefulness and quietening of the senses. And in the gradual training, this comes after virtue as part of sense restraint. So again, we're trying to move further inside ourselves to find the happiness from within. And the Buddha said that the happiness of sense restraint is unblemished happiness. So it's not kind of overridden with very abrasive or overstimulating sensual impressions that sometimes actually make it very hard to notice the subtler happiness inside. Okay? So does that all make sense? And does it sound attractive? Does it sound attractive? You're all going to look even more beautiful soon. You already have beautiful smiles. Yes?
Aren't they also sometimes laid out in a positive sense, such as the first one being compassion, the second one being
generosity,
the third one being what would the word be? Celibates, probably.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. Absolutely.
And the fourth one then would be,
being honest.
Being honest.
And using our speech in beautiful ways. Yeah. That's absolutely what I was getting at. Yeah. And you can have fun, you can extend it and extend it and extend it. There's no kind of limit to how far virtue can go. It can become something that you do intentionally, and you do it even when you don't have to do it, just because it's a beautiful thing to do. Like, I love to praise people. I love to just tell people the goodness and the qualities I see in them, because I feel that we don't tell each other enough. You might think, well, this person probably knows. No, they don't know, actually. And they might have had so much criticism, they might have had abuse, they might have had a really rough day, They might just not hear it, because psychologically we are primed to take in the criticism, and it takes about 6 times or 10 times longer to actually receive praise than it does blame. So I use my speech as best I can, to say, I see that you're really reliable, or you have this beautiful ability to kind of inspire people, or whatever it is that I see in another person. I try and use my speech in that way. So not only honest, but also encouraging, inspiring, condoling sometimes. Yeah, we can express empathy through speech. So we're not going to be practicing a lot of speech in this retreat, but we are going to be asking about the Dhamma, and I would encourage you to try and, really embrace the silent opportunities, because you won't get many in life, and it's not many communities you can be in also where you can be in silence with others. I find that so lovely that I can be around people and be silent with them. Normally we're either with people and we feel we have to be somebody for them, right? Or something to them. Or we think that we have to be alone in order to be silent. But for me, just being around people and being able to share silent and warm-hearted space is really healing. And I feel I can drop all my social kind of masks. So see if you can really embrace that. It's a very beautiful gift for yourself, and it definitely helps deepen the meditation, because you're going to be having a dialogue internally anyway, using thoughts and words of loving kindness. Of course, if you need to ask anything, you're welcome, and there'll be question and answer sessions as well. So yeah, absolutely the positive aspects, and that's called charita sila, so it means the sila to be done rather than to be abstained from.